And so this normative concept of property, I think it really begins or it's the human being relationship with nature in a lot of way, right? It's like how much rather than how much when we go into the world and make productive use of these scarce resources, we establish this relationship called property. And it begins really with our own biology, right? And that's where Hoppe goes next, is into this kind of Lockean view as property as an extension of individual self-ownership. And I'll read just a quick excerpt on that. Hoppe writes, as a matter of fact, even if we were to assume that we lived in the Garden of Eden, where there was a superabundance of everything needed not only to sustain one's life, but to indulge in every possible comfort by simply stretching out one's hand, the concept of property would necessarily have to evolve. For even under these quote unquote ideal circumstances, every person's physical body would still be a scarce resource, and thus the need for the establishment of property rules, i.e., rules regarding people's bodies, would exist. One is not used to thinking of one's own body in terms of a scarce good, but in imagining the most ideal situation one could ever hope for, the Garden of Eden, it becomes possible to realize that one's body is indeed the prototype of a scarce good, for the use of which property rights, i.e., rights of exclusive ownership, somehow have to be established in order to avoid clashes. Now, this is one of those areas that it just seems so abundantly obvious to me, the reality of individual self-ownership. But when I've tried to use that as a justification for property, or as like the foundation of property as a normative concept, I've had a lot of people argue with me. They're like, no,
Right.
you're not individually self-owned, right? You're this
Right.
composite of other influences and personalities. And so how do you deal with that? Do you take the Lockean view? Or
Well, I take the Hoppian view, which is based upon some of Locke's insights. This is an example of what Hoppe is such a precise, clear, powerful writer. But in this one paragraph, there's a lot of things compressed and a lot of assumptions. Um, so this first of all, this paragraph illustrates sort of the problem or the problematic nature of some of these hypotheticals. Like, for example, in economics, I think Rothbard and Mises use this idea of the evenly rotating economy. Now, that is actually an impossible situation, but they're trying to mentally isolate aspects of reality to help us focus on certain phenomena, right? Like interest or time preference or uncertainty or the role of money. Like, you wouldn't need money in an evenly rotating economy because you would know everything. So that kind of,
right,
although the examples always break down if you take them seriously because they're literally impossible. So it's just like if you have a math equation and you accidentally introduce a zero in the denominator, like there's x minus y, and they happen to be the same as a zero, you can get any result possible, and you might get weird results because you don't realize you made that mistake. And the same thing is true if with these examples. Now, the same thing is true here. Hoppe takes it halfway. See, he says, imagine the Garden of Eden where there's superabundance of external resources. Now, superabundance basically means we're basically like little mini gods or something. But he says we still have physical bodies, so he's imagining we still have physical bodies. Because if you took the example all the way to this ghostly realm of like where angels or spirits, like ghosts that kind of flow through each other, we can't. So we don't have any needs. We're actually each omnipotent. We have all the needs and wants fulfilled, and we literally can't interfere with each other because we're like ghostly bodies. Then we're not even talking about the real universe. So he keeps one aspect of it. He keeps the fact that we have bodies to show that
right.
even if you ignore the problem of scarcity in the world of external resources and needs, if we still identify ourselves as having human bodies, you can still have fights over that, and you would still need property rules there. So what he's trying to do is trying to show that, number one, your body is a type of property or a resource that you need property rights for. And number one is the prototype, because you really can't imagine away the physicality of your body and still have a realistic example. You can imagine away everything else, but not your body. So this is why, number one, you have to have property rights in your body, which some people call self-ownership. And you And this is the prototype, which means that the same reason that you need property rights in your body is why when you relax these constraints and say, okay, but the real world does have scarce resources out there that we need to use, then you also need property rules in those things too. So first we establish self-ownership, and then we establish ownership of the self-owning agents in external resources. So in that loose way of putting it, or that general way of putting it, there's a parallel to what Locke says. Locke says we're self-owners, and therefore we can own things that we appropriate. His argument is a little bit flawed. And let me say one other thing. One criticism some libertarians make of the self-ownership idea, I don't know which one you're referring to that you've heard, but one criticism is that they're leery of a type of dualism or mysticism that they believe is inherent in the idea of self-ownership. Like they think that if you're a self-owner, then your self must be something different than your body, like a soul or a spirit. Like, so they're imagining this metaphysical dualism. So they think that self-ownership implies a religious perspective, but it doesn't at all. As Roderick Long points out, as I pointed out, the precise way to put it is body ownership, as Hoppe emphasizes here. So your body is a scarce resource. Now, legally and jurisdically, and economically, we have a concept of the person or the agent or the actor. We call like you are you, but you have a body, which means that your body is one concept referring to your corporeal body, but you is your personality. Now, atheists think that this is buying into some religious mysticism to point this out, but it's not. It's simply conceptual distinction. It's like saying that conceptually there's a distinction between your mind and your brain. It doesn't mean there's no connection. It doesn't mean that there's a spiritual mind. It just means that the concept of mind is different than the brain. And that's easy to see because, if there's a dead person on the ground, that body has a brain, but it doesn't have a mind anymore, right? So these are just different concepts. You can change your mind, but you can't change your brain. You know what I mean? Your brain has a weight, but your mind doesn't have a weight, for example. They're just simply different concepts. And they're related. And likewise, your personality, what some people call your soul, but what we don't have to, we can just say your person, your agency, your identity as a person or as an actor is distinct from your body, although they're definitely related because you can't be an actor without a body because your body is how you interact with the world. So these are just different concepts. So one objection to self-ownership is that it's religious. Leland Yeager made this objection to me, and I'm an atheist too, so he doesn't know what he's talking about. I mean, when I say self-ownership, I simply mean body ownership. And all I mean by that is you have a scarce resource in your body and someone has a better claim to it than someone else. And either that's me or it's someone else. So the choice is really between lawlessness and chaos and the war of all against all, or slavery or self-ownership. And libertarians simply prefer self-ownership. That means I am the one that has the right to decide who gets to use my body. If you have a woman, for example, Sharon, and she has a body, then the question arises, who gets to decide who can have sex with that body? And our answer as libertarians is Sharon. We don't have to decide metaphysical questions about or religious questions about whether Sharon is a soul or not. It doesn't matter. We can identify her as a person, and Sharon is the person in control of her body, and she's the one who has the right to decide who can have sex with it, right? Any other answer is either slavery or lawlessness.